Having an avoidant partner can make a relationship extremely difficult. But what about an avoidant ex? How are you supposed to get their attention and their love when they're so good at stonewalling you? Well, I'm here to tell you that it can actually be easier to get an avoidant ex back than really any other type of ex. It might sound crazy, but this is actually backed up by all of my experience as a breakup coach over the last 15 years. I'm Brad Browning, author of The X Factor 2.0, and I've helped thousands of clients get a second chance with their exes. So you can trust me when I say that an ex with an avoidant attachment style can be a huge advantage for you if you do want another chance with them. And the reason for this has to do with why the relationship typically ends in the first place. But for this to make sense, we have to talk a little bit about attachment styles and how they work. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into it here. I've made a whole video on this topic that I'll link to in the description below. But what you need to know is that avoidant is one of the 4 attachment styles. Everyone has an attachment style. And this determines the way that you create an attachment to another person. Now, this affects all relationships in your life, but it's felt most strongly in romantic relationships. Now, everyone's attachment style is going to be a little bit different, but they boil down to 4 groups: secure, disorganized, anxious, and avoidant. And for our purposes, we're really only talking about those last 2, anxious and avoidant. Because if you're watching this video, it's pretty safe to bet that you have an anxious attachment style and your ex is avoidant. Now, this is a very common pattern in relationships. And what this means is that you two respond in very different ways to stimulus in a relationship. And by stimulus, what I'm talking about is anything that affects the relationship, either good or bad, big or small. These are moments of connection or disconnection. So for example, the first time you both said, "I love you." I'm sure it was a magical moment for both of you. You held each other close and, everything felt like it was falling into place perfectly. But then, you may have noticed a change in the coming days. You, excited by this deepening of your connection, wanted to spend more time together and connect in new ways. It's like you wanted to crawl into their skin and live in there. And you might have noticed your ex, pulling away, becoming a little distant or seeming distracted. So same stimulus, different responses. And now let's talk a little bit about a moment of disconnection. So say the two of you have a big fight. You're screaming and yelling at one another. Let's say you work through it to an extent. You come to an agreement, or at least, decide to drop the subject and keep the peace. And now at this point, you're afraid to lose this relationship. You don't want there to be any distance between the two of you. So you might reach out to your ex more, make more attempts to connect with them, both to shore up the relationship and to quiet your own anxiety about possibly losing them. And again, your ex will use this as an opportunity to pull away, to get some space and to process what happened. They're also hurt and afraid about what it might mean for the future. But their way of coping is just completely different from yours. So while your ex's response might be more harmful, these can both be negative depending on the intensity of the reaction. Clinginess can be just as destructive as avoidance, and the two sort of feed off one another. And they can be damaging because both clinginess and avoidance don't take into consideration the other person. They say to the other person, my feelings and my needs are the priority here. Now, I often get a lot of pushback when I say this because people say, well, I'm only clingy because I love them and I want them. They're avoidant because they're selfish. And my counter to that is that, to think back on all the times where you were most clingy. Was it about how connected you felt to this person? Or was it more about the fact that they were so inconsistent that made you feel crazy? And I think you'll find that clinginess is more driven by anxiety than it is a real bid for connection. But again, you can both be forgiven because this isn't a conscious process. It's driven by an intense burst of emotion, so it kind of hijacks your behavior and makes you act in ways you wouldn't otherwise. And the other thing about these attachment styles is they're not totally fixed. You can be more secure with one partner and more avoidant with another. Chances are you're not going to totally change your attachment style overnight, but they will shift and change based on how you're treated and the patterns that you create in relationships. Because, anxious behavior can actually trigger avoidance in the other person. And avoidance can also trigger anxiety in the other person. And it makes sense when you think about it, right? If you've been on 3 dates and, the other person suddenly says something like, "I love you, I need you in my life, we're meant to be." Well, you're probably going to be put off. You'll pull away from them in a big way if you don't end the relationship entirely. Basically, when we identify clingy behavior, it can set off alarm bells. So you think, oh, this other person is way more invested than I am. We're not on the same page. I'm in danger of them getting closer to me faster than I can handle. And for an avoidant, their radar for this kind of behavior is way too sensitive. They can take even a minor sign of interest and perceive it as a threat. And instead of talking about this, an avoidant person will do really what they know how to do. And they'll pull away and they'll leave you wondering what the hell happened. And this can trigger more clingy behavior in you because you feel threatened by the distance they're creating. When someone pulls away, it feels like a rejection. So you're just trying to repair that hurt by really, bridging the gap. It's a chicken or the egg situation. Are you being clingy because your partner is avoidant? Or is your partner being avoidant because you're being clingy? And there's rarely an easy answer to this question. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's a cycle that you're participating in together. And this push and pull can actually draw you two together in early dating because it's like a roller coaster that you're riding together. You're both feeling a lot of intense feelings. And even if they're not always good feelings, it is going to create a bond. And of course, if you don't find common ground eventually, then you end up building a pretty shaky relationship. The anxious person feels like they're being denied love, and the avoidance feels like they're being smothered. And eventually, you're going to want to get off the roller coaster. So let's talk a little bit about how this can help you get your ex back, because that's what we're here for, really. So basically, if you and your ex broke up, even if it seemed to be happening for another reason, chances are this was really the main factor. Your ex feared the closeness that you represented. They felt like they had to fight for their independence in the relationship, like they were losing themselves to the relationship, and they didn't know how to express that to you and establish better boundaries. The good news is that, if you want them back, you just have to interrupt this pattern. That's it. Sure, there might be other small issues to work out, but if your ex is avoidant, then chances are this is the bulk of the issue. And to make this happen, we have to really understand the other person's point of view. So let's go deeper into what sets avoidance apart. So first off, you need to know that I'm talking generally here. Having an avoidant attachment style, being an avoidant, looks different for different people. There's even an avoidant personality disorder for people who use avoidance as their only coping strategy and completely shun the world outside themselves. So chances are, your ex isn't that extreme. They're not a lost cause. I doubt they're even the worst that I've seen, because I've seen some situations where extremely avoidant exes can actually still be won back. Now, these are people who ghost a long-term relationship just to avoid even having a conversation. And actually, just as an aside here, but if your ex ghosted you, please leave a comment below and subscribe, because I'm working on a video on that topic right now. And on the other side of the spectrum, I also want to say that just because your ex is avoiding you, it doesn't mean that they have an avoidant attachment style. If your ex never showed any of these signs while you two were together, and now they're giving you the cold shoulder, that's a different issue. And I've actually made a few videos on what to do if your ex is ignoring you that I'll link in the description below for you to check out as well. But just don't diagnose your ex as an avoidant just because they've changed since the breakup. So as we go deeper into what makes an avoidant, try to determine how bad your ex's avoidance problem really is. So here are some of the real signs of an avoidant person. First, avoidants value their own independence, and so they often have fewer social connections and are less consistent with the people that they do spend time with. They sometimes struggle to make connections with other people because of their tendency to withdraw socially, but that's not always the case. Some avoidants are quite good at friendship because it's less intense than a romantic relationship. They don't feel as threatened because they know their friends aren't going to overwhelm them and ask for a level of closeness that they really don't want. And one thing that practically all avoidants struggle with is conflict. So during fights, they may stonewall you or give you the silent treatment. And this can obviously be extremely difficult to deal with during and after a breakup, as I'm sure you're already aware. And even if they don't outright stonewall, they'll tend to avoid conflict by changing the subject, minimizing your feelings, or even just telling you what you want to hear just to end the conversation. And another hallmark of avoidance is that they'll run for the door at the first sign of conflict or commitment. Now, hearing all this, you may think that avoidants don't want closeness and intimacy with really any other people. They want to be left alone and all you're doing is providing them a momentary distraction from the solitary life that they've chosen. They're just less lonely than other people, and they don't need as much as you do. But actually, this is wrong. Avoidants do want that closeness and intimacy the same way that any other person does, or even more so. And this is what people get wrong about avoidance. They think that they're all just loners who just don't need others. But they do want love and affection, but they just don't always respond in the best way when they actually experience it because it scares them. In fact, a lot of the time when you feel like they don't care at all because, they're shutting you out, they're really sitting there furious at themselves because they feel they can't connect with you. They hate that they run away and avoid things. They want to just hold you so badly, but it's like there's a wall that they just can't get over. So don't think that your avoidant ex is totally over you. Chances are that they do miss you and they do still love you to an extent. They just don't know how to show it. The truth is that they feel threatened by closeness. They lack the emotional tools to deal with it. And so it feels overwhelming and destabilizing. So just remember, they don't hate you. They don't even really want space the way that they seem to. It isn't their feelings that are lacking. It's their ability to follow through. And this is why I say that it's actually easier to win back an avoidant ex than it is to win back somebody with a secure or anxious attachment style. Most avoidants come back because, the reason that they left in the first place isn't about any real issue in the relationship. Not really. Now, I'm sure that they seem to have a good reason at the time, but what's really happening is that they're making an excuse just to get that distance from you. They think that they need that distance to feel comfortable and safe, but when they get it, they realize that it's not what they wanted at all. And that's when they'll start to miss you, and eventually they'll come sniffing around, hoping for another chance. Because their reason for the breakup was a temporary heightened state of emotion. They were pushed away by that closeness. And now that you're apart, the reason that you broke up is no longer relevant. It's kind of a paradox, They left because you got too close, but now that you're broken up, you no longer have that closeness, so they don't have a reason to stay away. Their major objection has really been removed from the equation. Now, they may think, okay, well, I don't want to get too close to them again, but I do need intimacy. And why would things be any different with somebody else? Now, of course, this is a huge boon for you if you want them back. Just a little distance will convince them to give you another chance a lot of the time anyways. So does that mean you just, have to reach out and talk to them and they'll be willing to pretend that none of this ever happened? Well, no, unfortunately, that's almost never going to work. Remember, they are still avoidant and they're easily overwhelmed. So even though they want that closeness, you can't just, offer it up like that. I know it can be totally frustrating, but that's just how it works. If you come at them too aggressively, they'll run away again because that's just the pattern that they're familiar with in relationships. So what should you do instead to win them back? Well, now that you understand where this comes from, it's going to be much easier to cope with and forgive your ex for their avoidant behavior. And that is the first step to breaking the pattern. You need to understand that it's not personal and that it's not an attack on you. This is just how they deal with difficult emotions. Now, you do need to think about your role in the pattern here because really that's all you have control over right now. You can't change your ex, but by modifying your own behavior and your expectations, you can create a relationship that actually does work. So think about all the times that you two dealt with issues like this. So let's take a specific example. Now, maybe you wanted them to meet your parents and they shut that down immediately. You felt hurt by this rejection and they felt like they were being, pushed or manipulated. So how could you have handled things differently? Well, maybe instead of asking them to meet your parents point blank, you could have started by discussing the topic, more broadly. So you could say something like, how do you feel about meeting one another's families? I'm not sure if we're there yet, but it's something I'd like to do down the road. And this sort of, puts the ball in their court. This way they don't feel ambushed and you two are able to discuss the idea in a more abstract way. So if they say, I'm just not ready for that yet, then it's not going to feel like such a huge rejection. I think that planting seeds like this can help you get the relationship that you want with an avoidant, without actually scaring them off. So instead of waiting for them to move things forward and getting upset when they don't, plant some seeds and then let them bloom. Now, obviously, this is the kind of thing it's only going to be relevant once you two are back together and moving in the right direction. But it's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking about right now, or you're going to end up, feeding into the same problems. Now, I know that this is putting a lot of the onus on you for your ex's behavior. And that's not to let them off the hook. They need to work on themselves too, but you can't force them to make changes, and especially not while you're not together. So wait until you have reconnected successfully to even have a conversation about this. And even if they really, push themselves to develop better coping skills and better communication skills, chances are they're not going to completely change their attachment style. So don't expect them to be, a brand new person once you get back together. You do need to ask yourself if you can live with this and still maintain, your peace and your happiness. You need to really ask yourself if you'll be able to stop yourself from continuing to the cycle that's actually keeping you apart right now. And for right now, one of the best things that you can do is reflect on your own behavior and how it shaped the relationship and the breakup. So how should you actually treat your ex during this time? Well, first, as I typically do, I'm going to suggest that you go for a period of no contact for at least a period of time following the breakup. This is pretty standard practice, but it's especially important with an avoidant ex. Because remember, they need that space both to start to miss you and to process the breakup, but also to get that sense of safety and independence that they felt was missing in the relationship. Now, this is going to go a long way to repairing what's broken between you. And you don't even need to do anything more than that in many cases. Just getting some space will make them realize that they need you in their life, and they'll swallow their pride and come back to try again. But if they don't come running back because, they're stubborn or afraid to open up or whatever it is, you're going to have to make the first move to actually get things started. Remember, despite their rough exterior, they're actually very sensitive people. So, act accordingly and don't make any sudden movements. Basically, just take it very slowly and don't demand too much of them right off the bat. I know that you're ready to jump back into a relationship, but they need to ease in so that they can, maintain their independence and not feel threatened. And this is really important at all parts of the process, from how you approach them the first time after the breakup, all the way to how you handle your first few meetings, and right up until the point where you decide to get back together. And then again, onward into the early stages of the actual new relationship. Now, I know that you may not be used to interacting with people in this way. If you're an anxious person, you're used to connecting more directly. But if you can master this, your ex is going to warm up to you, and it'll make the whole process much easier. And remember, this is just the beginning. With time, this more gentle approach will show your ex that you're a safe person for them to get close to, and will ultimately help you create an even closer relationship than you thought possible. So with that in mind, don't make demands of them right off the bat. If they're not ready to see you, don't push it. Just talk, have fun together, and rebuild that relationship rather than worrying about the next steps. And really, you must give them space during this process. So don't text too frequently. And if they take a little while to respond, don't worry. Remember that this doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means that they're still feeling things out and being cautious. And the two of you have different ways of handling closeness. It's very important to let them set the pace during this process, at least at first. You don't want to recreate the conditions of your last relationship. Sure, you may be able to get them to agree to get back together, but really, we're talking long-term here. And if you really want to maximize your chances of getting your ex back, I'd be happy to help you. I offer one-on-one coaching through my coaching program at breakupbrad.com/coaching. I'd love to hear all about what you've been through with your ex, and then we can work to put a plan together to rebuild your specific relationship from the ground up. Again, that's breakupbrad.com/coaching to see my current availability and sign up today. I hope to hear from you soon. Now, as I've said, this is a delicate process. It's all about showing a bit of interest and then backing away. It's kind of like flirting. You don't want them to know that you want them 100%. You're trying to create that tension that will keep them wanting more. And to do that, you need to focus on shifting your own perspective. To better connect with an avoidant, you need to address your own anxious behavior. And the funny thing is that anxious and avoidant couples are actually very common for a simple reason. Avoidants struggle to connect, and anxious people desperately want to connect. So avoidants will put up walls and try to back away, and anxious people will blow right through them. And in the short term, this is flattering for the avoidants, who often feel like they're difficult to love. And it's flattering for the anxious people because, they've won over somebody who's so independent. But in the long term, it ends up really being unsatisfying for both parties. The avoidant feels like they're being rushed and overwhelmed. It's like they're being asked to do more than they can handle. And the anxious partner feels as though they're not being given enough love and always having to ask for more, which is obviously not a very good feeling. So we want to break this cycle this time around so you can have a more healthy relationship. And since you can't, change your ex, you're going to have to modify your behavior a bit. And if you've watched this far, you're already well on your way to making this happen because, you'll be able to see this pattern at work. When they pull away, you'll know not to chase after them. Of course, it is going to be hard sometimes. You'll need to do your best to hold on to this perspective. So look at your life from a top-down view. Remember that this relationship isn't the only thing that matters. It's not your only source of happiness here. And whenever you find yourself, obsessing over the relationship, over what your ex is thinking or feeling, and, you get that clingy urge, take a step back and breathe. This is the time to turn to other things that bring you joy in life. Your friends, your family, your hobbies. I know it feels counterintuitive, but this will actually bring you together in the long run. One thing that triggers an avoidant partner is feeling like they're the other person's sole focus. If you can show them that you're independent and secure in your life, they're going to be more attracted to you than ever because they won't feel pressured. And when you do see or talk to your ex, resist the urge to talk about the relationship, or the breakup, or what they're looking for, who they're dating, really anything like that. I know, you want to know, but answering these questions is not worth pushing them away. Your time is much better spent just chatting, laughing, and reconnecting. And that's why I say to live in the moment when you're with the ex. You can't change the past, and you don't want to get caught up in what the future holds and actually miss out on the present. Now, here's another important thing to remember. Don't take their behavior personally. Remember that this is how they deal with everyone in a relationship. It doesn't mean that they don't like you or don't love you or want you. It's just the fact that they struggle to connect that's keeping them away. So don't go, wow, I haven't talked to them in a few days, or, they're being so quiet. They must be over me. I should call them and see what's wrong. Try to remember that it's just a quirk of their attachment style. And if you give them a little space, they're a lot more likely to come back to you. Now, there is another common pattern here that I want to warn you about when it comes to avoidant exes. And it's that they'll often start things up again while also trying to keep you at a distance in the long term. So, say the two of you will start sleeping together and hanging out every couple of weeks, but never get beyond that point. Or maybe you'll be, just friends, or you might even get stuck in the talking stage. And you'll think, well, this is nice, but why aren't we moving forward? I want a partner, not a pen pal. So what's going on? Well, what's happening here is that your avoidant ex is giving in to their avoidant behaviors and keeping you at a distance to maintain their own sense of self. They saw what happened last time the two of you got together, and it scared the hell out of them. So they're refusing to put themselves in that situation again. But at the same time, they want you and they care about you. They really don't want to lose you. And really, they don't want this weird half relationship either. They feel it's too risky. So again, don't rush your ex. If this has been going on for a few weeks or even a month or two, this might, just be a slow start. But if it's been any longer than that, then things have definitely, plateaued, and you're going to need to take action. So if your ex is treating you this way, you need to make your expectations clear and resist their desire to make this normal. So if they say, I just want to be friends, or I'm so happy with how things are right now, then don't share their enthusiasm. Make it clear that you need more from them, or you're not going to stick around. I know that a lot of people struggle with this, with being this direct. And in that case, you may want to use actions rather than words. So, make them jealous through social media or, by going on a few dates. And at the same time, don't lap up any crumbs of attention that they throw your way. So don't respond to late night booty call texts, and don't be their backup plan when it comes to, making weekend plans. Basically, hold them to a higher standard. And if they're going to reach it, and they're going to have to reach it if they really want you in their life. All right, thanks for watching all the way to the end. If you're dealing with an avoidant ex and you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I love hearing from all of you. And while you're at it, of course, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for brand new advice videos every single week. I'm Breakup Brad, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye for now.